Welcome to Weekend Breakfast. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I'm Refiloe Mpakanyane. It is a fine day forecast for the Sunday, the 4th of July. It's 15 minutes past 6 on Weekend Breakfast, the Sunday edition. Let's talk wellness, let's talk health, and let's talk about interventions and ways and means to look after our bodies. Helping us do that this morning is my guest on the line, Andy Cook. He's the founder of Exceptional Health, and today's focus is on nasal washing. We're talking to Andy because he's the co-founder of Exceptional Health, and nasal washing is a practice that's been around for a very, very long time. One that I came across specifically as a hay fever and sinus sufferer, but in recent times it's found to have all sorts of interesting, useful, and perhaps even preventative uses. And that's according to the Journal of the American Medical Association, stating that a nasal spray that deactivates seemingly deactivates the COVID virus in the nose may not only prevent person-to-person spread of SARS, but diminishes the severity of the disease in the patients. That's all stuff in the journal, but let's explore the practice widely and in general. Welcome to Weekend Breakfast, Andy Cook. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Refiloe.
It's a pleasure to have you on. Let's talk nasal washing, what it entails. Just what is it?
Let me just start by saying I was quite shocked in the news again, the record highs again of COVID numbers, and it just doesn't seem to be coming down. And whenever we deal with something, a pandemic like what we're experiencing right now, I think there's three key factors that always are in play, and that's number one, prevention, number two, infection, and number three, transmission. And quite simply, if you can prevent the infection, there'll be no transmission. And in our current preventive toolbox, we have hand sanitizing, which is spoken about a lot, and our hands are raw, mask wearing, and then physical distancing. I always call it physical distancing because it is possible to be social at a reasonable distance. And we'd like to see, well, I'm so glad you called it nose washing. People think it's kind of a weird concept, you don't wash your nose, and yet, as you said, it's an age-old concept, and we'd like to see nose washing or nasal hygiene in general added to that list, added to your preventive toolbox. In fact, Dr. Long Jones, who developed the product that we market called Clear Nasal Spray, and he described it as a soap for the nose. So where you could wash your hands with just water, and that helps a little bit. But it's a hell of a lot better to use a good antibacterial soap or an alcohol. And that's exactly how the xylitol and the grapefruit seed extract in the Clear Nasal Spray works.
So differentiate for me. I mean, it sounds when you describe what it's what is inside the nasal spray. It sounds a little extreme to some. Why? What is the sort of chemicals that you're putting in it versus a nasal bath that one might use when you've got sinuses and it's simply warm water when you're using a neti pot, right, for your sinuses, and it's simply warm water with maybe a bit of salt and maybe a bit of bicarbonate of soda, and that's generally that saline solution sort of clears you out, but also moisturizes or brings some humidity to that nasal passage.
Firstly, let me just correct something. Xylitol isn't a chemical. Xylitol is a very soothing, natural sugar. When you use it in the nose, it's much nicer than just the salt by itself. There's a lovely sweet kind of aftertaste.
Sure.
And you're perfectly correct that the salts and bicarb certainly help, and they do. But if you know about salt, you'll know that it also dries things out. Generally, what causes the problems that we have is dry membranes, which cause inflammation, which in turn cause congestion. And xylitol basically reverses that whole process. And there's a study that was done that shows that by doing that and by helping shrink the mucous membranes, it would increase the airway volume 36% more than a plain saline would do. Because the saline eventually, you help with the congestion, but eventually you dry the membranes out again, you start the cycle all over again. Dry membranes, inflammation, congestion, more nasal washing. So the xylitol is incredibly important. And it's not, just to tell you a little bit more about the xylitol, it's a very low glycemic sugar.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah, so it's it's a 5-carbon sugar, as opposed to most sugars which have got 6 carbon molecules. Now, I don't want to get too involved here, but that's basically one of the key components, one of the key factors that helps it to stop the adhesion of bacteria. In fact, there was a study done in 1998 where they found that strep pneumo, Haemophilus influenza, and Moraxella catarrhalis, these are 3 major pathogens that live in the back of the nose and in the sinuses, and they're responsible for all sorts of things like sinusitis, rhinitis, otitis media or middle ear infection, bronchitis, and pneumonia, and various others. And the xylitol in a nasal spray blocked the adhesion of the bacteria in the same way as in the mouth it blocks the adhesion of the strep mutans, which is the bacterium that causes tooth decay. So that was a wonderful breakthrough, and that's what led to the development of the clear nasal spray.
Now, speaking of then, I love the way that you've broken down and explained what xylitol is, the breakthroughs, and the understanding of how it works. But that coupled with a grapeseed extract, and explain the role of grapeseed extract within nasal hygiene and within the spray. What does that do additionally?
All right. What I wanted to say, though, is if people wanted to follow up on any of the studies that I mentioned, they could go to clear.co.za, and they all listed there, and they can read up on them, and they can go into a lot of depth. So I'm not going to go into a lot of depth. I'll just mention that in November last year, and this is on the back of a lot of studies that were done during this epidemic, they wanted to find out, hang on, we know that clear can block the bacteria, but can it block virus as well? And so in November, as I say, Utah State University in America and the University of Geneva in Switzerland both did a study on the xylitol and the grapefruit seed extract, the GSE in particular. And they found that it destroyed, talking about now soap for the nose and washing your nose and it being like a good antibacterial soap or an alcohol. You'll see why I mentioned alcohol. The clear nasal spray destroyed 99.9% of the SARS-CoV-2 virus in the same way as the other group, which was a 90% alcohol. You know, the GSE is actually just the preservative in the nasal spray, and it turns out that this preservative is the one that's actually killing the virus. So we're not saying that this is like a silver bullet, and that by using
not by any means, not until we've got a president standing on a podium and uttering those words, or someone.
Dr. Gustavo Ferrer, he's a pulmonologist in the States who's got his own ICU in Florida, and he's a COVID ICU specialist. He's spoken a lot on television in the States about nasal washing. And last month they were doing a launch of the clear nasal spray in the Dominican Republic. And he was speaking to fellow pulmonologists and then a whole lot of other specialists, ENTs, etc., and government health authorities. So you spoke about when the president gets up one day and says, this is what we need to do. It made me think of this, because he actually got up and he said, and I quote here, he said, if health authorities around the world would recommend using nasal hygiene with the same intensity with which they promote hand washing, mask wearing, and social distancing, it would increase the efficiency of curbing this pandemic. And I just found that very powerful.
Andy, thank you so much for your time this morning, and helping us explore nasal hygiene, better understand it, and just wrap our minds around it, and of course bring us all that useful insights and information. That's Andy Cook, who's the founder of Exceptional Health. It's 6:30 on Weekend Breakfast. When we come back from